In Module 4 of iView charting, we'll look at working with dynamic groups. Dynamic groups are a feature of iView that allow for the documentation and display of multiple instances of the same grouping of information. Examples of charting items that might fall into this category are peripheral IVs, wounds, and drains and tubes. Let's look at this in more detail. Here is the section for peripheral IV on the med surg band. First, notice the icon that appears to the right of the section title. This icon indicates that this is a dynamic group section. To add an IV to this section, the first step is to click the icon. Now we can see one group opened underneath the peripheral IV section. Dynamic groups are made up of two parts. The label, located here, where we will give this particular dynamic group entry a unique name, and the template, located here, which is a subsection of items that will be displayed for each entry in this group. Double-clicking in the cell next to the section title allows us to begin charting on the dynamic group. Once all the details are filled in, we sign the documentation. Additional dynamic groups may be added by clicking the dynamic group icon again. Watch as a second IV is added to this chart. Now it's your turn. Chart a new IV on this patient. Start by clicking the dynamic group icon. Now double-click in the cell next to the peripheral IV section title. Choose wrist, left, 18 gauge, and OK. Now you've created the label. Next, show that the dressing was dry and intact, and remember to click the X to move on. There were no complications. This IV is on a pump. Skip this field as we are just beginning this IV, not reassessing one. Click the X to continue. The phlebitis score is 0. This is an IV start. Indicate that you had one start attempt and then press the Enter key on your keyboard. Remember to sign the charting by clicking the green check mark. At times, it may be necessary to inactivate dynamic group entries. We'll stay with our example of the peripheral IV dynamic group to demonstrate. Let's say the IV in the right wrist has been discontinued. To discontinue or inactivate the group entry, simply right-click next to the label and choose Inactivate. This grays the entry out to indicate that it is no longer active. A dynamic group entry may be reactivated by repeating this process, but choosing Activate. This concludes Module 4 of iView charting. Please refer to your scenario sheet for instructions on the next set of practice exercises before proceeding to the next module.